What's something you know about a family member that you wish you didn't? It's commonly believed, but never been confirmed, that my aunt, removed, a nurse, killed her father-in-law. The man was the worst kind of alcoholic. His addiction absolutely ruined his life and profoundly affected the lives of everyone around him. In his last years, he was an angry, combative, hateful old man. He was in very poor health and required regular medical attention. He alienated anyone he met and couldn't keep a nurse on hand. His son's wife, removed, finally agreed to do the work after it became clear that he wouldn't be going to a retirement home and no one would go to the house to help care for him. 2 days after she started, he died. Removed called her husband and mother-in-law, who was no longer married to the man, and asked them to come over, but didn't say why. When they got there, he was dead. Removed refused to answer any questions, but was developing a black eye. She left and asked that as far as the authorities were concerned she was never there. Everyone supported this. No one talks about it. This took place 20 years ago. My grandfather once turned to me and said, "I've noticed a lot of homosexuals have mustaches. Do you think that improves the sensation? You know they call it sucking off." "Yes, grandpa." "I don't know, grandpa." "No, they don't, grandpa." I had a great aunt tell me she was dying of cancer, but not to say anything to the rest of the family. I was the only one close to her. She had refused all treatment, was 90 plus, and had decided enough was enough. She didn't want the family trying to talk her into treatment. Died 8 months later on her terms. Everything. My family is batshit. My dad's former best friend knocked up 2 of my sisters. One was 16, the other 22, within months of each other. Apparently he'd been fucking both of them for over 2 years. Dad found out and beat the shit out of the 16-year-old sister and praised the 22-year-old because that makes sense. She told her school counselor and child protection services stepped in. Thus the long journey of everyone getting thrown into government custody. I was 17 at the time, so it didn't matter much to me. I aged out and got a ton of benefits that I never earned. Free college for life in the state of Texas, living assistance, Medicaid until I'm 25, just being a few. The only thing that bothered me about the entire ordeal was seeing my little brother go through it. My mom's a whore. Her and my dad had knockdown drag out fights for over 13 years before he got in a car accident that put him in a coma for 6 months. At which point she left him for his childhood best friend of 17 years, whom she'd been fucking for months. She's a raging alcoholic and has a control freak to the highest nature. They have money though, and money goes far. My brother was returned to their custody, my sister and I aged out, and I get to watch from afar as my mom drinks herself to death and my brother is caught in the crossfire. Has already been thrown from a vehicle she was behind the wheel of 3 times, and despite trying to have him live with me, which he prefers, it never works out. Dad survived a coma, obviously, and suffers short-term memory loss and a stick up his ass. My grandmother forced her other son into a lifetime in prison because she paid him $20 to kill her husband. My sister, the previously 16-year-old, had her kid and cleaned up her act for a while, but eventually left it with my mom and started doing meth. Cleaned up, found a sugar daddy on Craigslist, and fucked everything up again. She's currently pregnant and living in my house sober with her daughter. I've tried to cut ties with my family so many times, but I can't. It's just not possible. My brother means the world to me, and I could never leave him to the wolves, but there's only so much you can do as a 21-year-old trying to get up on her own 2 feet. So, in answer to your question, I wish I knew nothing about my family. I'd rather live with the curiosity of who they could be than face the reality of this. This just reminds me of a funny story years ago. At some point I had decided to document my family tree, and the advice I got was to start with the oldest member of my family and get as many names as possible. So I went to my grandmother and told her what I wanted to do, and she just looked at me and said, "Jesus Christ, Radtech 830, I'm trying to forget those people." She was such a hoot. NSFL somewhat. Wife of a cousin of mine. She works as a model, very good looking and beautiful. But for her full-time gig, she works as a cosplayer for amusement parks, so she is around children a lot. Then one night, my BF and I was over at a friend's house and we ended up watching this independent low budget B movie, some random Russian comedy gore film that his friend downloaded. Ones of those films that will ever barely see the light of day unless you somehow stumbled upon online. Eventually it turned out to have lots of disturbing erotic explicit stuff in there as well. About 30 minutes in, there was a weird scene where some half vampire guy began having sex with a fully nude dead woman lying on a slab. They then pan on a shot of her face and her bare chest, and to our shock, it was my cousin's wife playing the corpse. Eventually the vampire guy tore her to pieces as he ate her. I guess he was a cannibal vampire as well. My BF and I were totally whiffed out. I was somewhat traumatized for weeks. From then on, whenever I see her in our seasonal family gatherings, it became very awkward, and of course I never said a thing to her about it, and honestly, I don't think my cousin or anyone else knew she acted in that role. They also came to a Halloween party of ours, and my BF intentionally dressed as a cannibal vampire, just for fun for her to see, but I don't think she caught on, fortunately. My sibling and I are pretty sure that my dad killed my mom. It wasn't necessarily murder, but he was negligent at best. She had symptoms of a heart attack early in the morning, but he refused to call 911. We didn't know anything about it, or we'd have called up V. Then when he finally did call around midnight, because she was no longer breathing, he gave the dispatcher the wrong address, so the ambulance didn't know where to respond. She finally got to the hospital around 3, but she was long gone by that time. Then, just to make it really special, we found out that he'd been having an affair for years and married the woman almost as soon as our mom was buried. He talked us out of an autopsy at the time, and because she'd been pretty sick before her death, her doctor didn't request one, so we'll never know whether she had a heart attack and he was just a negligent idiot, or if he took more of an active role in her death. Further clarifying, it wasn't considered a sudden death because my mom had MDS, a type of blood cancer. MDS, or the type she had, anyway, doesn't usually lead to death. It's extremely treatable. She was having blood transfusions a couple times a month, but she was still weak and tired a lot. The doctor signed her death certificate as a cardiac arrest with MDS as a contributing factor. The delay in getting her help is the one thing I really cannot forgive or understand. From her first symptoms until her arrival at the hospital, it took my dad nearly 24 hours. My cousins are actually half sisters and their father isn't his biologically. My aunt had 2 affairs early in their marriage. He knew about both of them, and yet he stayed with her and raised those awesome girls. I don't really know what the outcome would be if they found out, but I'm pretty sure it wouldn't be good. Clarification, I agree with both views here. I do think it's weird and stupid my uncle stayed with my aunt after 2 affairs. I also think it's honorable that after all of that he still raised my cousins as his own. If this secret did come out, he would still be their father. They were not separated at the time of her affairs. My aunt is nothing more than a miserable, self-centered bitch and I can't stand being around her. There are more reasons than this secret that make me feel that way about her, but that's a whole different story. The 2 other men wanted nothing to do with the girls after birth, and that is why I think he stayed. Either way, my cousins got to grow up with a dad, and a good one, and that's all that matters. Close bracket. My great uncle may have had someone killed for beating up my grandfather. My grandfather ran an illegal gambling ring in Central Texas from the mid-40s into the 70s. His front was a liquor store for the gambling ring. My great uncle ran the store and was my grandfather's accountant. The great uncle also had a bad case of polio and had very limited use of his arms and legs. Anyway, story goes a guy owed my granddad some gambling money and refused to pay. He beat up my granddad in the process in front of my great uncle. The dude called my family a host of names and left. He was found 2 days later dead in a field. We know my granddad didn't do it because the beating put him in the hospital for several days. I always knew not to fuck with great uncle Paul. That my grandfather has killed many men. He was such an easygoing, lovable guy and I loved him to death. But the stories of why and how many Japanese people he killed, I just don't like to think about it. He never told anyone about it, but he did write about his experiences and left the writings to my mother when he passed away. I read them and it really makes it hard to remember him as the sweet lovable old man I saw him as. But war is war, and war is horrific. I just know he was never proud of what he did, and that it haunted him until the day he died. My sister is into lesbian porn, and has watched it on the family, in a room visible to everyone, computer. She thought everyone was in another room watching a movie, and I come in, and she has headphones on watching some women play with pussy. She was fully clothed and all. Thankfully, she knows I know. I never was going to tell anyone, but she decided to get even, got into my room when I wasn't there, and pulled up something from my history to let me know she knew I also did it, creating a you tell on me, I tell on you type of thing. I wish I didn't see her with lesbian porn. I didn't need to know that. I also wish she didn't know about my appreciation of foot deep female assholes. I wish this whole thing never happened. She hasn't shown any indication of being a lesbian, but on the other hand, she's never had an actual boyfriend. My other sister found out about my other brother's habits. There's 4 of us, and we don't seem to be very good and keeping others out of our laptops. Those 2 did not come to an equitable arrangement of silence. I didn't need my younger sister to tell people, including me, that my brother has a thing for them big booty bitches. My mom used to go on mini rants about dad didn't pay any attention to her, aka, when they weren't fucking. It was obvious by the phrasing that that was what she meant. I think that would be a topic better for her girlfriends, but her girlfriends are all church ladies, so maybe she feels she can't talk about sex stuff with them, and she was talking as if she just wanted to vent. But I didn't need to know about variation of dad's libido with time. And she started dropping these on me when I was in middle school, which is a bit young, emo. Finally, I was able to confirm my mother's insinuations about sex or lack of it, because she is loud. Not like a porn star, but enough so that you can hear through the walls, and so that you could get an idea of what was going down. Dad would also make a noise. I developed a habit of getting up to walk around in a circle in the living and family rooms, which were farther away from the bedroom block of the house, and thought it's never been discussed. I just know the people in the rooms next to me heard as well. So yeah, I'd like to forget all this. My great grandmother lived with and slept with her brother, my great grandfather. They had 10 children together, and basically all of them had mental issues ranging from depression to schizophrenia to pyromania. All but 2 of them died of suicide. It's pretty gross. One time, about 20 years ago in the Netscape Navigator days, I was at my dad's office. He was in another room. I was trying to download the Doom Sharer and some WAD files, and I stumbled onto his search history. Gay porn. Lots of it. I've never talked to him about it. I've never told my siblings or my mom. I don't think he's leading a double life or carrying on affairs. He's a real homebody, never travels for business or anything, and I just don't see how he'd keep up a secret boyfriend. I'm a very stoic person. Even at age 12, this didn't really weird me out. My hope is that he's being totally happy with mom. I'd hate to think that he's been leading a miserable life not being who he wants to be, but he seems very happy. My sister is only my half sister, mom's. Obviously my dad knows, but I don't think anyone else knows, including my sister. I actually found out being a nosy horny early teen. I found some porn mags in my dad's filing cabinets, went looking for them another time, and snooped too far. Found an old letter from him to his attorney during my parents' divorce, referring to my sister as her child and even naming the father. I brought it up to my father one time and he admitted it, of course, and just said he loves her the same as his other kids and that's that. He even paid child support to my mother after they divorced, and my sister lived with her. My dad is such a huge part of her and her kids' life, and that is his first grandchild. Seeing him around my nephew brings out a side of him I've never seen. It's really nice. It's one thing I can never even imagine a way to approach at this point. I don't think I'll ever say anything. There's no point. My little brother steals panties and tampons. It started when he was about 6 years old, and he still does it now that he's in his 20s. The first few times he stole my underwear I shrieked about it to my mother. I got in trouble for snooping in his bedroom, and she half-heartedly told him to stop. Eventually it got to the point where I'd have to go on monthly stealth missions to his bedroom to throw away the random open tampons and reclaim the mass of my mother's bras and panties and my underwear because I'd find myself running out. I could not keep him out of my bedroom, but I was not allowed to be in his. Finally gave up complaining to my mother about it and just started putting her things back into her laundry. Then he started cutting them up when he hit about 12 years old. Not sure what changed, but the next thing I knew, I couldn't just reclaim my under things because the only things left to reclaim were tattered rags and random kitchen knives and scissors. By now, it was my tampons that he was stealing, and instead of just finding them opened, I'd find them opened and suspiciously browned. Mind you, I've no problem with guys liking a bit of ass play now and then, but leave my monthly feminine products out of it. Since he's still got a reputation of stealing shit from me, I was digging through his room several months ago to see if I could find something of mine that was missing within his filthy collections of junk, and found some rather sexy panties that I suspect he robbed from the girl my other brother was staying with at the time. I really never needed to know about this. I think my quality of life would have been far better had I simply assumed that my underwear and tampons were disappearing from my bedroom as a sacrifice to the unseen gods of menstruation. My mother seemed quite satisfied to pretend that it wasn't happening. After all, my grandpa on my dad's side told me that my mom used to have a twin. She overdosed when they were 18 or so, and he says that my mom had lent her the money to buy the drugs she died on. My mother has never mentioned anything other than a faint memory of asking her who a girl in a picture was, and my mom saying my sister. I never asked her about it or pressed her about the picture. It would explain so much if this is true, as my family is pretty fucked up, resenting each other for no apparent reason. TL. Dr. Mom had twin who odd and died and never mentioned it.